going beyond the limitations of bodyweight training and traditional resistance tools to amplify the results of movement training for tennis and any multi-directional sports. No mass, multiplanar, directional, and gravitational resistance. How does it work, and what does it do better than traditional resistance training tools for movement? To really understand why we have come to limit on-court training to mostly bodyweight drills, we need to take a closer look at resistance training, what it is, why it's beneficial, and why progressive overloading has been so difficult to achieve for on-court movement. So let's first quickly go through a primer on resistance training. First of all, what is resistance training? Well, quite simply, it is the application of resistance to elicit a favorable adaptation from the muscles and nervous system being trained. And what are the primary types of resistance? Well, there's body weight, where our own body weight provides the resistance. There's free weights and machines, which add mass to increase resistance. And of course, there's no mass resistance, bands and bungees, which can add resistance without adding weight. Now let's take a quick look at the pros and cons of these types of resistance. With body weight, there are, of course, no movement restrictions. Fluid natural movements are possible, and full speed movements are possible. And of course, body weight drills can be performed anywhere. The cons include, first, that the resistance is limited to your body weight. At some point, you can maintain but not improve movement skills because you cannot progressively overload. The resistance, your body weight, is a constant. With free weights and machines, you can significantly and progressively overload, and you can focus the overload on specific muscle groups you wish to strengthen. On the con side, exercises are mostly stationary movements and typically do not train coordinated muscle groups or movements at the same time. You cannot train at or near full speed movements with free weights and machines, and of course they are not terribly portable. With bands and bungees, you can apply variable resistance. The farther the bands are stretched, the more resistance that is applied. There's a greater degree of movement than is possible with free weights and machines, and they too can be used anywhere. On the con side, they must typically be held or anchored, limiting the range the player can move while using them. Resistance can mostly only be applied in one direction at a time. There is resistance on the way out, but assistance on the way back, before resistance can be applied again in the other direction. This is inefficient and worse, as will be discussed later, can have adverse training effects. And finally, bungees apply shear or horizontal force, which is not the force players actually experience in matches, which is more gravitational. And this too, as discussed later, can have negative training effects. So, what is missing from this resistance training picture that is keeping our athletes from moving better? Well, what we need is the ability to progressively overload at or near full speed movements in any direction against gravitational resistance. This would be functional resistance in the purest sense. We progressively overload our athletes in the gym with free weights, but we settle for body weight drills on the court, or we attempt to mimic body weight movements with tools ill-designed for the task. The result? Athletes are not reaching their full movement potential. What type of resistance tool would we need to allow us to train pure functional resistance for movement? Well, to answer that, first, let's take a closer look at exactly how movement drills and the application of resistance help athletes to move better. And this can be summed up in 6 words: neuromuscular stimulation, neuromuscular stimulation, neuromuscular stimulation. Our body, brains, and nervous system work together to help us move quicker. Electric signals are exchanged between the brain and our muscles, and the muscles are activated sequentially to make very rapid movements specific to our sport. And what stimulates the neuromuscular system to train it to work more efficiently? Well, that can be summed up in one word: resistance. What holds athletes back on the court is that the resistance applied to bodyweight movements is constant, the body weight itself. Progressive overload is not possible to further stimulate the neuromuscular system. Therefore, a ceiling is essentially placed on the athlete's potential for on-court movement. In addition, the pace at which athletes can improve is also slowed because additional stimulation cannot be added. But what about bungees? Bungees have been the go-to tool for adding resistance to on-court movement. But are they the optimal tool, or worse, Does bungee training do more harm than good? Are they a well-designed tool to improve on-court movement under resistance? Or as I mentioned earlier, are they an ill-designed tool for attempting to mimic on-court movement under resistance? Well, let's take a closer look. As I mentioned earlier, bungees apply variable resistance, meaning the farther the bungee is stretched, the more resistance it applies. For tennis training, and any training where change of direction speed is paramount, just as the athlete nears his or her change of direction point, the bungee has considerably slowed the athlete down. This almost completely eliminates the training effect of the first phase of change of direction, deceleration. On court, in a match, the athlete must sprint at almost full speed and then abruptly decelerate. The bungee continually slows the athlete down as they approach the deceleration point, exactly what you do not want. The athlete would be better off using only body weight than a bungee to train deceleration in this instance. But wait, it gets worse. At the most crucial moment of efficient on-court movement, change of direction, the bungee fails the athlete again. Not only has it harmed the athlete's deceleration training, but as the athlete plants and begins his or her return to the center of the court, the bungee is now pulling them back. Resistance has turned to assistance at the precise moment you want resistance from the opposite side. Because the bungee is pulling the athlete back, he or she is hardly required to push off at all, almost completely eliminating the training effect of phase 2 of change of direction, acceleration in the opposite direction. Now let's take a look at the athlete's movement patterns as he or she returns to center court. In these images, if you did not know better, you would assume that the athlete is moving in the opposite direction. Notice how she is leaning in the opposite direction that she is moving. This is completely natural, of course, as any time a sheer force is pulling you in one direction, it is only natural to lean against that force, else you will lose your balance and possibly fall over. Instead of accelerating back to the center of the court, pushing off of your outside foot, the athlete here is resisting the pull in that direction. Again, just the opposite of what you would like. Take a close look at a player's feet as they are being pulled by a bungee back to the center of the court. With each step, the athlete is braking with their feet against the pull of the bungee. Again, this is a perfectly natural response. It is reflexive and cannot be untrained. Again, the athlete is being trained to move slower, not faster, and would be better off doing this drill with body weight than with a bungee. So how do we overcome the drawbacks of ill-designed equipment like the bungee, but not give up the very real and desired training effect of progressive overload for movement training? We would need progressive resistance which can be delivered in multiple planes and multiple directions as experienced by the player in match conditions, does not slow the player down as they approach change of direction points, adds no discernible weight to the player, allowing at or near full speed movement, and delivers gravitational resistance versus shear resistance, allowing the player's center of gravity to remain undisturbed. So what does this resistance look like? Called dynamic gravitational resistance training, or DGRT, this type of resistance overcomes the barrier of transitioning progressive overload training from the gym to the court with virtually no compromises and without the multiple negative training effects of traditional banded approaches. It combines all of the positive aspects of bodyweight training and weight training and none of their drawbacks. How significantly does this form of resistance address the weaknesses of traditional resistance training for movement? Let's take a look. Of the 14 desirable elements listed here for resisted movement training, DGRT fulfills 13 of them, bungees 2, and free weights 5. DGRT is multidirectional, multiplanar, allows at or near full speed training, trains all phases of change of direction, maintains an athlete's center of gravity, reinforces good posture and an athletic stance, can be added to and amplify the training effect of any kind of workout, builds functional muscular endurance, delivers ground-up rotational resistance, strengthens the foot and ankle complex, can be used solo, and is extremely customizable for an athlete's age and strength level. That is not to say that other forms of resistance do not still have their place and are essential to a complete athletic development program, only that DGRT has fulfilled a crucial gap in progressive overload training for movement, which has existed for far too long and has kept our athletes from reaching their full athletic potential. And what does DGRT look like in action? Well, let's take a quick look on the following slide. Notice the fluidity with which the athletes can move, how resistance is applied no matter the direction they are moving, how a good athletic stance is reinforced, and how it completely trains the phases of change of direction. And don't be deceived by the speed and fluidity of these athletes' movements. Constant, unyielding resistance is being delivered, and the training effects are very real.
Yeah. I'm ready to play now. Put me in the game now. I came here to prove it. I'm ready to do it. I can't be afraid now. Put me on the stage now. I'm ready to rage now. I feel like an animal stuck in a cage and I'm ready to break out. So what are you afraid of? Those feelings are made up. Get in the game, your moment of fame. Show them what you made of. It's time that we stand up. It's time that we man up. For anyone asking who is the best, we putting our hands up. My time, my time. None of you people can tell me to stop. This time, like the last time, you better get ready to race to the top. I'm ready to do this, show you what the truth is. I step on the field, it's time to get real. I'm feeling so ruthless. My time. None of you people can tell me to stop. Lower the lights down. Hand over my crown. Hand over my heart. I do this for my town. I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time. None of you people can tell me to stop.
This presentation only touches on the primary benefits and advantages of DGRT. To see more of its varied applications and to hear from coaches from around the world who have been training with it, please visit WearBands.com. To continue a discussion on DGRT on a more personal level, and to have any questions you may have answered, please do not hesitate to contact me at any of the options listed here. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.